Welcome to HortTube. My name is Jim Putnam. This is my top 10 summer flowering shrubs. Keep in mind, I'm in Raleigh, North Carolina, zone 7B. If you're in zone 4 or 5, some of these are spring flowering things here in the south would be your summer flowering shrubs. So I'd love to know down below what's your go-to summer flowering shrub, whether you're in the deep south or in the north or here near me in zone 7B. In Raleigh, North Carolina. So I'm going to jump right in and let's get to the ones that are in bloom here in my area during the summertime. Number one on the summer flowering shrub list is definitely Abelia. Abelia come in all different shapes and sizes. There are pink flowering cultivars, white flowering cultivars. You can have Abelia that get 10 to 15, I've even seen them as tall as 20 feet in height if they're allowed to. As screening plants, they can be sheared off almost boxwood-like. And then we have lots of dwarf varieties that can be kept anywhere between 2 feet in height and 4 feet in height with just low doming habits. And those come in green foliage and variegated foliage. These pretty much start blooming in my area in Raleigh, North Carolina, sometime around the 15th of June or so, maybe slightly before that, and then they do not stop flowering until we have a frost in the fall. A lot of the varieties you'll see the flower is white or pink, and then as the flower fades, sometimes the calyx behind it, the part that holds the flower, will also be colorful in some sort of red or pink calyx on it. The stems on the new foliage you'll notice is red, and that's also interesting as well. But again, just one of those kind of bulletproof plants that people in zone 6 to 9 can grow. They're drought tolerant, and then you can get them in all different shapes and sizes. Number 2 is a Bottlebrush Buckeye. These are hardy in zones 4 to 8. A lot of folks in the U.S. can grow these. Really great foliage, and then for us, they're going to start blooming again during the summertime. Pollinators absolutely love these. They're all over them. Typically down here in the south, you'll see them more planted in the understory just a bit. Part shade. As you moved up further into zone 4, they could definitely take full sun. They could take full sun down here in the south as well, but they seem to hold up a little bit better in some part shade. Incredible gold fall color on these, yellowish gold fall color, just so it look great right through the fall. You can keep these shrub sized, or you can kind of limb them up into small trees over time as well, but just great additions to the summer garden that the pollinators absolutely love. Next up is butterfly bushes, and butterfly bushes, sometimes we'll see them in perennial catalogs because in the wintertime, we typically cut them down toward the ground, but they are woody shrubs and they can be left, in place. But most of the time we do cut them down to around 18 inches in height coming out of winter. What's great about butterfly bushes is you can get ones that are, you can keep 2 feet in height. And there's a butterfly candy series that I have a video on the channel for. There's 5 of those that are all dwarfs. Up to ones that almost can grow the size of small trees in a single season and get 14, 15 feet. Of course, the butterflies love them. That's why they're called butterfly bushes. Buddleia is invasive in some areas of the U.S., to the Pacific Northwest, and areas in Europe as well. But we've seen through plant breeding lots of new cultivars that are seedless, and which is allowing them to be reintroduced into those areas because they are great ornamental plants, and most people watching can grow them. All kinds of colors all over the place, from whites to pinks to reds to blues and purples, and just interesting new super compact varieties with almost abnormally large flower clusters on them. But it's kind of hard to miss, out in the full sun with a butterfly bush blooming all summer long. So this is American Beautyberry, and this is not going to be the showiest of the flowering shrubs that I'm going to show you in this video, but this is a native to the southeast United States. There are lots of other Calicarpa as well. So we have Asian varieties of Calicarpa or Beautyberry as well. Those are also going to be blooming throughout the summertime, and typically what you'll get is they'll be blooming further back on the stem and just bloom as the plant continues to grow during the summertime. They continue to bloom up the stem, and then a berry forms where those previous flowers were. And they'll be green most of the summer. As we get toward fall, the berries on American Beautyberry will start to turn a purple color. I have a white one out here in my garden, so purple or white or even pink. There's one called Welch's Pink that's a fantastic variety. And the pollinators go crazy for these. All of our native pollinators love these small flowers, but again, it's drawing in the pollinators. They bloom all summer long, so they never, once they get going blooming, the plant just continues to grow. The flowers progress up the stems all summer long, and then of course we get the berries in the fall. It's usually very late fall before the birds come along and take those berries. But again, we have Asian species of Calicarpa, native species of Calicarpa, all great additions to your garden because they're going to draw in pollinators during the summer flowering time and then give the birds some additional food in the fall. Number 5 on my summer shrub flowering list is Caryopteris. Typically, Caryopteris bloom very late in the summer. For some reason, the last few seasons, I've had these blooming as early as late spring and just continue to bloom throughout the summer. This variety that I have in my garden is called First Choice. There are a lot of great Caryopteris varieties, and there's gold varieties too. There's a Worcester Gold that I used to grow that has chartreuse foliage as well as the bluish purple flowers. Great little compact ornamental plants. Again, summer flowering, so a lot of the, get these spring flowering shrubs that come out with a bang, that kind of don't do much during the summertime. And these kick in right in the heat of the summer. Most people watching can grow Caryopteris. Just one of my absolute all-time favorites. And again, you're going to have pollinators on them, all day long. An extended period of time where those spring flowering shrubs are blooming, 2 weeks sometime at the absolute most. Things like, spring blooming azaleas and forsythia and all those, all those spring flowering things that go off really quickly. They're done just as quick as they start. This Caryopteris just will have flowers on it for months and months. And again, pollinators on them the whole time. Here in the South, we don't get great fall color on them. A lot of, and that's true with a lot of things. We just, the foliage gets tired on things in the South, but up in the North, they also have interesting fall foliage colors as well. Just great compact plants. Really fine textured foliage as well, which can contrast with some other interesting things in your garden. But Caryopteris is right near the top of my list for summer flowering shrubs. One of my just all-time favorite shrubs, period, is Clethra. Clethra alnifolia is native to the southeast United States. Typically find them in wet areas when I find them out in the world, but they transition to our landscapes just fine. This is a plant that's always doing something interesting. The older bark on these plants is really kind of striking in the wintertime. The newer stems on it kind of have a rusty color during the wintertime. So even without leaves, they're interesting. Then they flush out in the spring with really beautiful, interesting foliage. Again, those kind of reddish stems on that new growth as well. And then they don't bloom until, summertime. Again, most of those spring flowering things will have fired off, and then the Clethra is just a great nectar source for our native pollinators. And one of those plants that when I examine when they're in bloom, you won't just see native bumblebees and on them. You'll see all of these interesting non-stinging wasp and flies and just an interesting group of native pollinators that, just seem to be drawn to these plants. Now, they come in all different sizes. You're going to see mostly whites and pinks in the flower colors, and then dwarf varieties that can be kept 3 feet in height up to, this is Ruby Spice Clethra that you're looking at here, which I've seen as tall as, 10 plus feet, but can be kept more, 5 to 6 feet. Pretty compact growing shrubs, great ornamental plants, and incredible fall color after the flowers. So just again, one of my all-time favorite native flowering plants. So I'll say right off, Rose of Sharon has never been one of my really favorite kind of go-to ornamental shrubs. Previous, ones that were planted, have been very seedy and invasive in my area in Raleigh. But now we have seed-free ones coming. or out on the market, and they're just so much more floriferous than they were before. So many more flowers, great foliage, really compact habits. And so it's gone from way down on my list, like I would have never planted one for a customer, knowing that it was, could potentially be invasive, to, right at the top of my list. And I see more and more of them out with new genetics that are just kind of crazy how far this plant has come really, really quickly. Of course, it's in the mallow family, and everything in the mallow family has that little center piece there in the flower you'll see on okra and all hibiscus. And this is Hibiscus syriacus, is the Latin name for it. And we see white varieties, lavender, kind of red, but not quite red, reddish pinks, lots and lots of different flowers, lots of different sizes in the flowers as well. And again, just more and more floriferous varieties coming to market every year. Foliage looks great on them, and they're so long bloomed. They don't bloom all out at once. You'll see tons of buds forming behind the flowers that are open on any given day, and the pollinators just absolutely go crazy for these. For many of you watching in the north, hydrangeas are definitely summer flowering shrubs. Down here in the south, Hydrangea macrophylla and mountain hydrangeas and oak leaf hydrangeas have typically bloomed out by the time we would get around to what we would call summer, mid-June on, through the rest of the summer. And the hydrangeas that are going to be blooming for us are going to be Hydrangea arborescens. And even those are kind of toast, by midsummer. The flowers have kind of faded, whereas I was in Minneapolis just a few weeks ago, and, they're long past here, but they were just coming into full flower up there. But the hydrangea that is summer flowering here is Hydrangea paniculatas. So we've seen so much breeding in Hydrangea paniculatas. We've gone from just a few that I used to grow, like PG, and a few others, just old varieties. And we used to call them tree hydrangeas because they got so big. But through plant breeding, we've seen them shrink down. The flowers become more and more impressive. And of course, they'll just hold up in full sun here in my area in Raleigh, North Carolina, amazingly well, and just bloom and bloom and bloom all summer as long as they're getting some adequate water. They just continue to flower. The one some of the ones you're looking at here, this is white wedding, but of course we all know limelight and little lime, and so many new varieties coming. And some of them will turn kind of pinkish shades in cooler areas, and as the flowers go from kind of green to white to kind of pinkish hues. Do a little less of that here in the south. They tend to just kind of go, pat from white to fade it out. But Hydrangea paniculata is definitely great summer flowering shrubs here in the south. Number 9 is crepe myrtles. And so we're going to think of crepe myrtles mostly as trees. And some of these photos I'm showing you here are, big giant trees throughout my neighborhood that come in white and lavender and purple and red and pinks and just colors all over the place, and interesting shapes, where we have weeping habits and upright habits, and they have great fall color, and they're very long bloomed in comparison to lots of other flowering shrubs. But we also have dwarf varieties of, shrub-sized varieties of crepe myrtles, and they all come in those same kind of colors as well. Pocomoke is one I've grown for years and years and years. It's just a great little flowering shrub, probably underused, if anything. I always think crepe myrtles are overused, but some of the dwarf ones I feel like are kind of underused, the little low shrubby growing ones. So, be on the lookout for, crepe myrtles that you can keep under 6 feet in height, because probably most people have a room for them in their landscape. And they're easier to garden with. The roots aren't going to be quite as aggressive on some of the dwarf varieties as the bigger ones can be. But again, crepe myrtle shrubs definitely on the summer flowering list. Number 10 definitely has to be roses. I mean, roses are definitely something that will give us color all summer long, pretty much for everybody across the whole country, really. The photos you're seeing here are from the Raleigh Rose Garden, and we're taken right in the peak of summer. They will have their dips and dives where, they'll come into full bloom and then they'll slow down a bit, and some pruning can be done on them, or just naturally they'll come back out, put on some new growth, and start blooming again. But, we all know that roses come in all different colors and sizes and, you know, hybrids, and we have climbing roses and shrub roses and small growing roses and ground cover roses, and just, you know, all over the place. Roses definitely, you know, have a place in the American landscape, and I think they're the #1 group of selling plants worldwide. So you have roses #1 and hydrangeas #2, and with good reason. They have such an extended period of flowering, and of course, you know, incredible fragrance, and, you know, all the things that roses give us. Unfortunately, you know, some of these hybrids over here that you're looking at in these photos do take quite a bit of maintenance. So there's a lot of maintenance behind the scene in a rose garden like this to keep these looking this pristine all summer, because the rose family of plants is definitely under attack from, you know, every insect, you know, insects, deer, you know, rabbits, and disease problem that comes along. You know, absolutely love them. So through some plant breeding, we've seen some roses with less maintenance, but still, you know, they're all going to, you know, have the potential to have issues in the garden. But I think most people think that it's worth it because, again, they're the #1 selling group of plants. Real quickly, after that 10, I'm going to give you a few bonus ones. Definitely Vitex is on my list. There are Vitex varieties like Summertime Blues, which I have here in my garden, that can be kept more shrub size. You can keep this one more in the, you know, 6 to 8 foot range, where other Vitex can get quite a bit bigger than that. Amongst the pollinators' favorites, I actually like Vitex much better than Crape Myrtles overall. They're incredibly long bloomed and virtually no maintenance. Deer won't eat them. Just great ornamental shrubs that the pollinators go absolutely crazy for. Another bonus is the Cestrum parquet, which is really going to be more of a southern plant for sure, but this is one that the pollinators and hummingbirds absolutely love in my garden. Here in Zone 7, they die back to the ground during the winter time, and then they come back vigorously and bloom literally all summer. There's not a day that this plant is not in bloom. It is invasive in some areas of the world, but not here. It also has this really interesting blue-green foliage that has a very, very pungent smell. You have to get up close to it and rub on it in order to get that smell, but it is really kind of funky. You know, so again, you know, those kind of plants, though, that don't get eaten by, you know, are deer and rabbits and that kind of thing. But great plant, again, for southern landscapes. And my last bonus plant here is oleander. Oleander, of course, is very poisonous, so you have to keep that in mind before you add it to your garden. If you have small kids or dogs that chew on plants, you know, it's a really funky plant, and it bleeds when it's cut, so I don't think anything would eat it. But if it did, it is actually very poisonous. But these bloom pretty much all summer long. We'll see them in coastal areas all over in the south, and then up here to about Raleigh. It's probably about as far north and west as we go with them, where they're still hardy. And the flowers are just covered in bees all summer long. You'll get different colors on these, from whites to pinks to almost reds. Very, very interesting, tropical looking plant that people really love and add, because, again, they bloom. Once they get started blooming in the late spring, early summer, they just bloom until they get a frost on them in the fall. So thank you very much for watching, and again, I'd love to hear down below what's your go-to summer flowering shrub in your area.